And these are the three things we just want you to walk away from today's session with. We want you to understand some of the principles of glass box program evaluation. We want you to see how to use a logic model to design and evaluate your programs. And lastly, we want you to be able to consider ways to use data to measure your impact and align with your logic model as well.
So for those of us in the world of departments of professional development, what does that mean? When we think about the outcomes we want for our teachers, we believe that it's necessary that we accelerate the growth of early career teachers so that each and every child has that teacher who's going to provide them with a strong competitive advantage. Our how really comes down to three areas. It's our coach mentor triads, which we'll share with you in just a little bit of what that looks like. Also, our rapid cycle teacher perception data that we collect that Vicky's going to share with you later as well. And I love the fact that Joellen, you spoke to one of my most, I think, important components is our coach principal dialogue. My very first role outside of teaching, after teaching for 10 years, I became a district-wide professional developer and then an assistant principal and a principal. And when I wrote my dissertation on instructional coaching, it really was around what principals can do to support coaches. And I think that coach and principal dialogue is critical to the success of new teachers. The district coach and the teacher mentor work together to understand the acceleration of skills and learning that the early career teacher is experiencing. And then they use the levers of providing additional support or less support as needed. There are times, because our teacher mentors are full-time teachers, that our early career teachers need more than really good mentoring. They may need some job-embedded professional coaching from our district coach. And you can see on this model, there are times when our district coach will go in and do either the in-classroom support or video-based support or distance level support for that early career teacher. In our model, every early career teacher has a minimum of 2 key people that they can use to support their work.
And we're going to talk about the glass box because the glass box allows us to really look deeply into what are those critical actions we want to take in order to achieve the outcomes we want to achieve. One, it allows us to plan what we believe are those pivotal components, those elements of a professional learning initiative that we believe will move us closer to the results that we want to achieve. And it is our ability to monitor and measure each of those steps along the way that gives us the opportunity to make adjustments during our program. And measuring as we go with evidence gives us data-based power to make decisions about more of this, less of this, add this, take this out. And each of those decisions is a decision that is intentionally made to move us closer and closer to the outcomes that we want. The capacity to unpack our planning, to deliberately, intentionally plan our professional learning and plan what we expect to be the outputs and outcomes from our actions. Here's something I know about a lot of people who are involved in professional learning. They plan their activities. They plan what they're going to do. Yet they often take insufficient time to think about what will come as a result of each of those actions. And a logic model, using that as a planning tool, helps us do that.
These 6 components, which it was really important to start with those really specific indicators of success that could be easily translated into a couple of different tools. So in this case, St. Vrain has used these 3 different tools. The teacher self-reflection tool, or what we might call a needs assessment, just a chance for teachers themselves to reflect on their own practices in each of these domain areas. And that's something that St. Vrain captured at the beginning, middle, and end of year to really capture those outcomes in a longitudinal way, or their progress over time. On the input side, they've used a coaching support log. And this is a tool that really just captures how are coaches and mentors spending their time supporting teachers. So also aligned with those components, really helping to answer not just what are the outcomes we're driving towards, but what are the activities that are taking place and how are we as a coaching team spending time to drive the outcomes that we want to drive. And then lastly, mentor feedback, an additional layer of data that can be collected to inform, how the program is going throughout the year. And with all of these data collection tools in place and aligned to those components, St. Vrain then kind of utilized the data in aggregate in KickUp to interpret the answers to important questions like how are our efforts in our coaching support translating into growth and improvement in practice for teachers. So I'll just go ahead and zoom in on the teacher self-reflection tool. So again, this was the tool where teachers are reflecting on their perceptions of their practice. And it's aligned to these 6 domains in that if you kind of look at this screenshot on the left, this is the view of a teacher. And I'm asked for each of the domains to kind of consider my practice in each of these discrete practice areas and indicate where I feel I am in my practice on this 4-point progression. So am I starting, just building knowledge, practicing, advancing, or innovating? So with all of this data being captured, St. Vrain can take a look at, in aggregate, the answer to some of these bigger questions, like where are teachers already finding success? Where do they need support? And how are they growing throughout the year? So this is one data source that we'll take a look at, and you'll see kind of their real data to see what questions you can answer with it and how it may be similar or different to data that you are collecting. And I just want to orient you to what you're looking at in this report. This is 2020-21 data, so last year's data, captured in those tools that we talked about. So along the top, you'll see 3 different sections of data. The first is the teacher reflection data that we talked about. The second is the coaching activity data. And then the third is sort of a bonus section. So if you do have extra time, you can explore other interesting subsets of data that show some comparisons over time. But in this teacher reflection section, if you kind of scroll to the middle, you'll find this main visual, which is called a heat map. And this is capturing all of that perception data in one picture that really helps you find the hot spots and look at progress over time. So along the left, you can see each of the 6 domains that were measured, those outcomes. And if I click on any one of these carrots, I can see the discrete practices that teachers reflected on. So as an example, teachers reflected on their differentiated instructional practices, and they reflected at the beginning, middle, and end of year. And what I'm looking at in these colorful cells is the percentage of teachers who shared that they were in those upper 2 tiers of the scale at the beginning, middle, and end of year. So at the beginning of the year, I can see that only about 28% of teachers felt they were at those highest levels, advancing or innovating. But then as we move towards the end of the year, and I hover my mouse and I see each of those breakdowns, I can see 62% almost are in those upper levels, and not any teachers have identified that they're at that starting level. I can see off the bat that I'm looking at the total number of hours in this first visual, almost 1,000 hours logged. And I can see how that aligns with each of the domains that were captured. So it looks like almost 300 of those almost 1,000 hours were spent in this responsive instruction and feedback domain. And what's interesting here is if I keep that in mind for a second, and I jump back to the teacher reflections, I can see that in the responsive instruction and feedback section, a significant degree of growth from beginning of year to end of year. So that's just one way to make a connection between how coaches are spending their time supporting these outcomes and what outcomes we're seeing in teachers' perceptions as well.
Something like this is really important as a temperature taking along through the year. It's not that, that autopsy data at the end of the year where, oops, we let everything go until the end and then we found out. I think the ability to go in and see what teachers are asking for from their coaches, what are the things they might be struggling with is really important to inform the professional development of schools or districts, to inform, coaching, more training for the coaches even. I think that data as a whole is really important. Our district has not collected much data in the past. As I've stepped into this role, I've discovered we have no baseline for any of the new things we're putting into place. So something like this would be really interesting in presenting, let's say, to a board or to my bosses about how are we doing throughout the year.